Fallen are renegade space marines that split off from the Dark Angels Space Marine Legion 10,000 years ago and have since been scattered across space and time by a warp storm. They are the secret enemy of the Unforgiven, a group containing the modern Dark Angels chapter and its successors. To those Fallen that still dwell within the galaxy, many have become Chaos Space Marines, others pirate and renegade warlords, while some have since regretted their heresy and live a life of peaceful seclusion. Furthermore, the return of their Primarch, Lionel Johnson, has seen a dramatic change in their prospects. There are several different types of Fallen. As a whole, they have no unified outlook or goal. Many Fallen are non-chaos renegades who seek the destruction of the Imperium in a continuation of their rebellion. Others serve the Chaos gods and have fully succumbed to chaos, yet still others realize they were misled in their rebellion and once again fight in the Emperor's name. While not all of them have succumbed to the powers of chaos, many have, and notably every Psyker captured by the Dark Angels has been so far. For some, this was a natural step, cementing beliefs fermented by Luther. For other fallen angels, their embracing of chaos was an act of desperation, as they saw no chance for salvation in the fractured remnants of their legion and home world. The Chaos gods themselves have vied with one another to claim these corrupted fallen angels as servants. While Khorne was quick to shackle the most ruthless and warlike of the fallen, the other remaining gods were more subtle in their advances. Other fallen venerate chaos, undivided instead, as they think themselves above servitude to a single god. These fallen draw strength from the arcane currents of the warp when they need to, but are blind to the many manipulations worked upon them in return. However, many other fallen realize that their actions during the destruction of Caliban were questionable. Others, claiming that the Lion himself was chaos-tainted and that Luther was the true loyalist, have remained unrepentant and possessed of the same ideals they fought for during Caliban's fall. Disgusted by the perverse Chaos gods and unable to reconcile themselves with the Imperium, such members of the Fallen often lead a solitary existence. Many become mercenaries or pirates, while others attempt to integrate themselves back into normal human societies. Some Fallen, however, have realized their mistake and fight on their own in the Lion's name once more. Others band together in warbands or even army-sized formations, and the threat they pose is exponentially greater. All of that is irrelevant to the Dark Angels, who believe that the only way they can restore their honor and trust within the Emperor's eyes is if all the Fallen are found and either made to repent or are slain. Consequently, the Dark Angels and the rest of the Unforgiven constantly hunt for the Fallen and regularly prioritize it above other concerns. Fallen warbands are highly targeted by the Unforgiven, and they will divert all possible resources to their destruction or capture, even at the expense of other strategic goals. Those Fallen that are captured are taken back to the Rock, where interrogator chaplains attempt to make them repent. Occasionally they do, and so die quickly. More often than not, though, the captured Fallen refuses and suffers a long, agonizing death at the hands of those who would save his soul. The seeds of the Fallen were planted during the Great Crusade. During the campaign against the human planet Sarosh, enemy forces managed to sneak a nuclear warhead aboard the Invincible Reason, flagship of Lionel Johnson, Primarch of the Dark Angels. Luther, second in command of the Legion, discovered the plot, but his jealousy of the Lion prevented him from stopping it for a time. In the end, he saved the Lion's life, but his Primarch discovered his hesitation. Luther and his forces were forced to return to Caliban in the aftermath, ostensibly for recruitment and administrative purposes, but many felt it was akin to banishment. Luther and the Lion had another falling out when Luther left his post at Caliban to fight alongside War Master Horus in the Zaramund campaign against human rebels. Although the campaign was successful, an angry Lionel Johnson arrived shortly after to scold Luther and strip him of his fleets before returning him to Caliban. As the Lion's absence from Caliban increased due to the Horus heresy, Luther and his forces increasingly felt bitter and abandoned, left to deal with a rebellion by Caliban's disgruntled former nobility and chaos-affiliated sorcerers. The warp taint plaguing Caliban became apparent, and Luther and his followers became convinced that Caliban would be destroyed by the Emperor when this became known. They believed that the Lion had knowingly exiled them as a death sentence. Thus, the seeds of heresy were planted. The Fallen degraded into even further treachery when an expedition to Caliban, led by the loyal Dark Angels chapter Master Belath, arrived before Luther. Eventually, Astalan and Zahariel led a purge against those among Belath's forces who would be loyal to the Lion, including the chapter master himself. Eventually, Luther's angels fully embraced treachery when they attempted to utilize the insurgents' own chaos powers to halt the rebellion on Caliban. At the end of the Horus heresy, when Lionel Johnson returned to Caliban, his fleet was met by a devastating barrage of defense laser fire. Stunned by the ferocious attack, Johnson withdrew his vessels from orbit and attempted to find out what had happened on his homeworld. A nearby merchant ship soon provided the answer. Luther, second in command of the Legion and the Lion's greatest friend, had ordered the approaching fleet to be fired upon. His reasoning was unknown to the Primarch, but the Lion suspected that Luther, like many of the Lion's brothers, had become influenced by chaos. The fury of the Lion and his dark angels at what they perceived as a terrible betrayal knew no bounds. Johnson himself immediately ordered a sustained bombardment of the traitor positions and led an attack against Luther's position personally. In the resultant battle, the two adversaries struck blow upon blow against each other, tearing down the monastery around them until nearly the whole massive edifice had been leveled by their battle. Meanwhile, the massed guns of the Dark Angel fleet pounded the planet until the very surface of Caliban began to crack under the strain of the bombardment. As the planet itself started to break apart, the battle between the Lion and Luther reached its climax. Luther, apparently aided by the powers of chaos, unleashed a furious psychic attack that knocked Johnson to his knees and left him mortally wounded. But as the dying Primarch struggled to stand, his noble features racked with pain, it was as if a curtain was lifted from Luther's eyes and he realized the full extent of what he had done. Devastated, the realization shattered his sanity, and he slumped down beside Johnson, no longer willing to fight. Soon after Luther's breakdown, a warp storm of unprecedented fury engulfed Caliban. In an uncontrollable flood of psychic energy, the warp rushed into the physical universe. The immense strain these forces placed upon the planet, in combination with the tectonic shifting and cracking caused by the orbital bombardment, caused the horrific end of the entire planet. Caliban itself shattered, breaking into countless chunks of dead and dying rock. The fallen Dark Angels who had served under Luther were sucked from the face of Caliban into the warp and scattered throughout space and time. None know of these events other than the Dark Angels, their successor chapters, and the Emperor on his golden throne. Even within the chapters themselves, very few Brother Marines know the full story. It is only when Dark Angels gain entry into the Deathwing that they learn that many of the Dark Angels who followed Luther are still alive. Moreover, unbeknownst to those at the time, the warp storm on Caliban and the subsequent scattering of the fallen throughout time was the result of a causal loop in the 41st millennium. When the enigmatic Dark Angel known as Cypher surrendered himself to the Inner Circle, he revealed the Rock, the shattered remains of a portion of Caliban repurposed into a fortress monastery for the chapter, had been host to an ancient device known as the Tuchulcha. This device, when combined with two others, could create a bridge through time. Perhaps in a final bid to change history, Cypher warned that Astalan's fallen were seeking the same devices in cooperation with the Death Guard Typhus, and that the two planned to create a new Death Angels Legion by combining the Plague Fleet with the original army of Fallen. Although initially torn, the Dark Angels came to support his counterplan when the Watchers in the Dark, the enigmatic companion entities that shadow the chapter, spoke in his favor. Eventually, all three devices were brought within proximity of Caliban, and a time portal was opened. But as the enemy Fallen closed in on the portal, Ezekiel convinced Azrael to destroy it, arguing that history should not be rewritten and that the Fallen may bring even greater catastrophe to mankind by changing history. Azrael agreed and commanded Tuchulcha to scatter all those near the rift, inadvertently including the Fallen 10,000 years previous. Sometime later, the Dark Angels librarians were struck down by a shockwave of terror and fell visions. Most of these were too fragmentary and fleeting to be recalled in detail, but the vision that struck Ezekiel seared itself into the mind of the Grand Master of Librarians. His vision revealed the entirety of the Fallen to him, causing him to learn that during the Horus heresy, Luther had built a legion-sized force of Dark Angels that were loyal to his cause. Worse still, Ezekiel now knew that the Fallen's numbers were even greater than the Inner Circle had feared, as a greater portion of them were still trapped within the warp. Before Ezekiel or his chapter could act on this, though, Abaddon's 13th Black Crusade finally broke through the Imperial line at Cadia, and the Great Rift was created, sending the Imperium into turmoil. Later during the Terran Crusade, Cypher and a group of Fallen proved vital in the rescue of the reborn Primarch Guilliman, but were arrested by the Adeptus Custodes on Terra shortly after. The Rock was later invaded by a demon army led by the fallen demon prince Marbas. Although they defeated the demons, the chapter suffered heavy casualties. Years later, rumors, psychic signatures, and the torture-wrought confessions of captured prisoners told the Dark Angels chapter that a large number of the Fallen were mustering within the darkest recesses of the warp-shrouded Imperium Nihilus. The rumors claim the gathered Fallen are the size of a legion that could bring the entire galaxy to heel and are being led by a single commander. Only Supreme Grandmaster Azrael suspects this commander could be their Primarch's betrayer, Luther himself, as the Fallen was freed from his hidden dungeon during Marbas's invasion of the Rock. In spite of the dire threat they pose to mankind, the return of Lion L. Johnson to the Imperium in M42 has caused a massive change in their prospects. As he engaged in his first forest walks, his extra-dimensional traveling throughout the galaxy, the Lion came into contact with various loyal and traitor Dark Angels. He has begun reintegrating willing Fallen back into his legion, a move not seen in Dark Angels history. These redeemed Fallen are known as the Risen, and as their Gene Father ventures the galaxy, he absolves more and more of the chapter's wayward brothers. Thank you for listening to this entry from the Warhammer 40,000 Lexicanum.